Welcome to the Rehumanization Station. I'm your collaborator, Christopher Jones, aka Dr. X, and this podcast is an extension to my Flippin' and Vibin' brand, where Vibers seek to transform narratives in society, education, and sport, and a variety of other sectors. Today is our Black History Month special, where we have a Black History Viber named Robin Walker with us today. Robin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very, very well. Pleased to be here.
Yeah, I'm very happy to have you here. Robin Walker, also known as the Black History Man, is an educator considered to be the UK's most preeminent African history scholar. Robin has been teaching and lecturing in African world studies, Egyptology, and Black history in adult education, universities, and at conferences for nearly 3 decades. He is also a best-selling author with over 16 books to his name. Robin is also part of the comprehensive program, the Black Secret Education Project, which is about quietly empowering the people. Robin leads this amazing course, and their mission and intentions are to engage, enlighten, and empower people across the world by shattering the illusion that Africa is just a cultural backwater and that Black people have contributed nothing to the world culture. And that is a lot what we'll get into today, right? Thank you for being here. I'm excited. So Robin came and did our Black History Month event last night, which was amazing. Thank you. We talked about Rob talked about reclaiming narratives and decolonizing the curriculum. And so I know we don't have much time today, but it's okay. We're going to try to get through it as swiftly and efficient as possible. All right. Now, this is the part of the show where you and I just vibe and allow our listeners to get an idea of your background and some of your personal interests. Does that sound okay? All right. So, Robin, what's your story, Mr. Walker? What is tell us a bit about yourself, like your birthplace, family, friends, anything.
Okay, I was born in London. Mm-hmm. My family is from Jamaica. Between the ages of 4 and 6, I lived in Jamaica. My mum and dad's marriage broke up while we were in Jamaica, so my mum brought us back to England. So I ended up growing up in Milton Keynes, which was a new city that was being built in England. The most important thing about my growing up is my mum insisted that I learn a musical instrument. So I started, trying to learn to play the trumpet, and then from there I progressed onto different other brass instruments, baritone, euphonium, trombone, and that proved to be a very, very good decision on my mum's part, because becoming a musician gave me a lot of skills, a lot of expertise that I was able now to transfer to other areas. Okay. I originally came to London to study classical music, and somebody spotted me with a trombone over my shoulder and said, "Is that a trombone?" "Yes." "Can I take your number?" "Yes." And that was somebody that was going to introduce me to the Jazz Warriors, which was, at the time, Europe's only all-black jazz orchestra.
Okay.
It was founded by the legendary Courtney Pine and his wife, June Guichard. And that was the beginnings of my cultural education, because those men taught me about culture. They taught me about the importance of being about, our heritage. So they were the people that got me to read jazz men's autobiographies and biographies. So I read about Coltrane, I read about Davis, I read about Parker. Right. And this was the beginnings of me learning about the importance of our history and culture and so on and so forth. And then the next development, I quit Goldsmiths College after a year.
Okay.
They were into very, very modern classical music. You know, the kind of classical music that goes do-ka-dee, tick-o, all this kind of... Okay. And there's no way I'm going to do that rubbish for 3 years.
Okay.
So, my tutor negotiated my exit. And he said, finish the first year, do the exam, pass the exam, but then they can negotiate getting me into a different London University college. So I ended up in LSE, London School of Economics. Graduated, and then I promised myself, when I graduated, I'm going to read that book right there, Chancellor Williams, The Destruction of Black Civilization.
Okay.
read the book 1990, and that was the beginnings of me evolving into what's going to become the Black History Man.
That was powerful. And you mentioned siblings at all?
I have one sister.
One sister?
5 years older than me.
5 years older than you, okay. Is she into history as well? Or
No, not at all.
Not at all.
Not
That's okay.
even close.
That's okay, okay. Well, thank you for sharing some of that. What activities bring you peace, love, and happiness? Would you say then?
I still love music. So what it is I do try to go through I've got a huge record collection, proper records as well, none of this CDs and download nonsense, proper albums.
Okay.
So I try to listen to them. I'm also learning more and more about Black classical composers.
Okay.
So there's an African-American composer called William Grant Still. They call him the Dean of African-American classical music. And his music is halfway between classical and blues. And I'm coming across more and more of his material online.
Okay.
So I am online a lot, YouTube, because I believe YouTube is a really good place for people to get an education. Yes. All the old film footage is up there. All the old performances are up there. So I make a point of listening and watching as much of that stuff as I can.
That's a great point. So I was mentioning to you yesterday about how during my PhD, YouTube was a heavy influence on how I learned a bit about ancient African history, or just learn about yourself, is what I called you and other people VMs or virtual mentors, which is because y'all are very prominent in my journey. Like I said, I didn't think it would be so quickly that I meet you, but I'm so happy that you're here. But yeah, YouTube is definitely an educational tool that people definitely need to get involved in. Okay, so music. What about books? What type of books? I mean, I know you write a lot or write books, but what other books, any other genres interest you outside of history?
Okay, I'm not. I'm known as the Black History Man, but my real specialism is Black Studies, not Black History.
Okay.
Black Studies in its modern form was started by the African-American intellectuals, beginning with people like Professor Nathan Hare, Professor Maulana Karenga. And what it is Black history plus what? Plus psychology, sociology, politics, economics, art, music, literature, that kind of stuff, plus religion. And those are where my book collections, that's where my interest is.
Ironically, you say that. See, so Black Studies is a umbrella for many different disciplines, you would say, right? And I remember I asked a head of department at a university about maybe incorporating a Black Studies program, and they said, we already have a race and racism module. I can't make this up, y'all. I can't make this up. So again, it's about relegating our history or just our agency to being targets of discrimination, right? But thank you. That's very important that you just mentioned that. Okay, so Black Studies. All right.
And the way the importance of Black Studies is, I like to say, Black history is interesting. Black Studies is revolutionary.
Black Studies is interesting.
No,
wait. Black history is interesting.
Black Studies is revolutionary.
Indeed, I agree with that. I want to take that one with me. All right. So what about when it comes to people? Like, who's had a big influential impact on your life?
I am very fortunate to have had a number of great male role models and mentors. I could just reel them off, but the most important ones are Dr. Femi Biko.
Femi Biko, okay.
London-based academic and one of the fathers of Black Studies in Britain. Okay. Now, in Britain, as you know, Black Studies is not a part of any university curriculum, with the exception of possibly Birmingham with Kehinde Andrews.
And we know what's happening there now.
Right. So the people that did it back in the day did it outside the system. And Dr. Biko was one of those. So he was a great mentor, a great inspiration. Another gentleman was a gentleman called Ray Bowen. Ray Bowen is an Egyptologist.
Mm-hmm.
And years ago, I showed him one of my essays. He tore it apart. He gave me such an intellectual ass kicking.
Okay.
And then called one of my friends to say, and if that Robin Walker listens to me, he's going to be big.
Oh, okay.
And the friend told me. And he was right. If I listened to him, I was going to be big. And my book, When We Ruled, is the direct consequence of listening to Ray Bowen. And then there's been other role models. There's a gentleman called Rowan Burke. And Rowan Burke basically taught me how to be a man.
Right.
How to combine a very Eurocentric exterior with a very Afrocentric perspective.
Okay.
And so what then happens is what Rowan taught me is a lot of people are going to underestimate me till they come and see my book collection.
Right. Okay.
Record collection. And yes, folks, it's records. And basically, Rowan Burke was the most Afrocentric person that I've ever met. But if you saw him, you wouldn't have thought so.
Okay.
Do you see?
Yes.
And I've learned that that's the best way to present yourself as a grown man.
Okay. Okay. And when it comes to like the people that influenced you and the work that you've done, well, really quickly, which book was your favorite to write so far of all the books?
To write, I've enjoyed writing all of them, to be honest. But my best piece of work, easily, is a book called Everyday Life in an Early West African Empire.
Okay.
What that book is about, the Songhai Empire of West Africa. Me and my team, we can give you the closest there is to everyday life. What were people eating? We can tell you. What type of music did they listen to? We can tell you. Their family structures? We can tell you. How they handled conflicts between the different social strata? We can tell you. What people did for a living? We can tell you. And I'm so proud of that piece of work. So it's called Everyday Life. Now, most people have never seen it. Most people have never heard of it. But that's easily my best piece of scholarship.
Where could it be bought from?
It's on my website.
Okay.
I have a website called Robin Walker, The Black History Man. And there's a page where the books are available.
Okay. Thank you for that. And this is the last question around the first part of our show. When we talk about threats, and what are some of the most challenging moments for you as an educator, and how did you navigate them?
The most important lesson I've learned is become entrepreneurial, because once you're entrepreneurial, you can dodge a lot of the threats. Do you see? I think what happens is a lot of us try to piggyback the system and let's try and carve out a niche within the system. And I think the lessons that we can learn from the Black British academics over the last 2 years is it probably can't be done. What I've done is I'm a firm believer in entrepreneurship. There is an African-American scholar that I read called George Sabira, Black Folks' Guide to Making Big Money in America. That book is another one of the books that changed my life. And I pursue entrepreneurship, so I'm a firm believer that people should, be generating passive income and that type of thing. And when you do that, the threats to you become a lot less, because nobody can fire me. Yeah. What people can do is they can choose not to hire me, but even if they don't hire me, my passive income is still coming in. Do you see?
Yes.
Yeah.
But at least you also know that people are hiring you want you to be there, right? Yeah. Okay.
Right. And the other issues too is that it gives me a certain freedom of speech.
Mm-hmm.
Because the truth of the matter is for a lot of black people who are in the system, 2 phone calls to your employer, and those phone calls say, "We heard that your man said this.
Mm-hmm.
Fire him." 2 phone calls, you're fired.
That idea of censorship when we're in a certain system. Yeah.
Right. You've got your work has to go through a peer review system, and the peer reviews, none of those people, know what your issue. Do you see?
Yes, I
And they can stop your work from getting published. And my whole thing is very, very much teaching as many people as I get to speak to. At some point in your life, you've got to become entrepreneurial because it reduces the threats to you.
And do you think that stems from, because you said you did economics first, right?
No, I didn't learn entrepreneurship from economics.
Okay.
Because I've got an economics degree, I can speak frankly about economics.
Mm-hmm.
It is a fake, bogus subject.
Why is that?
We could get into it, but the most important thing is economics does not teach you to become financially free. Mm-hmm. Entrepreneurship teaches you to become financially free. Okay, for people that disagree with me about economics being a fake subject, all right, this is what I say. This is my response. Go into any school, go into any college, go into any university, and this is what you'll find. The PE teachers really are sportsmen and athletes, for real. Mm-hmm. The craft design and technology teachers really are people who can build, people who can do engineering, people who can sew, for real. You go into the music department, they really are musicians, they really are singers, they really are composers, they really are producers. For real. Mm-hmm. And then go into the business studies and economics department, and they're just as broke as any of the other teachers. How's that possible? That's how you know it's a fake subject. But entrepreneurship is a different subject.
Okay. And from economics majors, and if they're listening, try to think about entrepreneurship or use. Yeah,
I mean, and here's the thing: any people who study economics, you're going to be vexed with me, but you can't argue with me because you know I'm right. You know I'm right. And if you want to get into entrepreneurship, George Sabira, Black Folks Guide to Making Big Money in America, 1980.
George Sabira, Black Folks Guide to Making Money. Okay. Ooh, thank you for that. All right, so now we're going to get to the second part of our show. So this is the part of the show where we flip the script to traditional narratives within it. I've had a chance to do an overview of some of your content. Obviously, I'm a subscriber to the Black Secret Project, Education Project, and much of your work is around, like we mentioned, about empowering and reclaiming a sense of identity for Black Africans, right? And so for our Viber audience and us too, let's attempt to flip the Black historical script, shall we? Now, my first question is around what are your perceptions of traditional or normative narratives in the work you do? So, for example, narratives that create prejudices and stereotypes and or inequalities among certain groups. Does that make sense?
This is what it is. To a certain extent, the people of Europe have a certain amount of respect for the people of Asia. Why? Because they've allowed a certain amount of space for the people of Asia to shine. So your average Englishman doesn't know anything about Chinese history, but they know the Chinese have a history. Mm-hmm. They don't know which dynasty came up with what, but they know the Chinese had dynasties.
Yes.
They don't know with the Arab world who did what, but they know the Arabs were a serious people in history. When it comes to us as Africans, the perception is we are nowhere to be seen in history, and we only pop up as somebody else's slaves. Okay. That's why there is a different level of prejudice aimed at us compared to people from Asia. Okay. because the people from Asia are seen as having contributed something to world civilization, whereas we are seen as contributing nothing to world civilization except to be somebody else's slaves.
Okay.
So that's the narrative we have to challenge. Do you see?
And so basically, understanding other people's history is, in our own history, influences how we perceive others, how we create certain types of narratives with other groups. Okay. And well, within that, is there any, what about outside of history? Anything else? Do you think that?
But here's the issue, you see, because history is the foundation of everything.
You're right.
So how we teach the history of literature is based on how you teach history. How you teach the history of music is based on how you teach history. So if we disappear from history, we disappear from all of them.
Could you give a brief example about how you mentioned Pythagoras' theorem yesterday, how that kind of correlates mathematics and history?
So, for example, Pythagorean theorem, according to the Greco-Roman scholar Plutarch, is actually ancient Egyptian. Okay, so what? The ancient Egyptians used to be black Africans. Now, the reason I'm saying used to be, because the modern Egyptians actually originated in Arabia. Now, some people are going to say, but Rob, some of them came from Turkey, whatever, yeah? They're conquerors. And they didn't just conquer Egypt, they conquered the whole of North Africa. And they conquered it between December 639 AD and 708 AD. And they've largely displaced the indigenous population. So there are black people in modern Egypt, but they're all in the south. There are black people in modern Libya, they're all in the south. There are black people in modern Algeria, they're all in the south, having largely been displaced.
And there are people in England, but they're all in the south, right? So how does is there a reason for, is there a reason for that? Because I know people mention about how in Europe a lot of us kind of gravitate to the south. Is that true?
That's true, but I think that's a different
reason.
Different reason. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got you. Okay. Thank you for that. So now that we understand that history plays a huge role in how we perceive other people.
Everything. And everything too, because if you're going to write the history of PE, it's going to be based on history.
You're right.
If you're going to tell the story of physics, it's going to be based on history.
That makes perfect sense too, because that's how that influenced a lot of my PhD work. When I understood more of my history, it was easier, or not necessarily easier, but it was more gratifying and more. Obviously, there's anger within that because you start to learn more about your history, start to learn about agency that we had, but at the same time, it does give you a certain scholarship that other people. It's hard for other people to perceive, right? Because of that programming and conditioning, and not understanding how influential African history was, right? Okay, well, thank you for that answer. But so within that, could you share a particular moment that you consider a turning point in your life when it comes to the work that you do as an educator?
There's been several turning points, but let me just give you one example.
Okay.
I was contacted by a Islington-based African something organization. They were mostly Ghanaians, but one of them happened to be, gave me a book and said, look through it. The book was called Living Cultures of Nigeria.
Living Cultures of Nigeria.
And as I looked through the book, I saw boots, I saw sandals, I saw artifacts that were of such a quality. And then I found out they were in the British Museum. And then the next question is, well, how comes they're not in the African history books generally? And that was the moment I realized that we've been played. So it's not just what information you tell people, it's also what information you conceal. And if people don't get to see certain bits of information, they will come away with the idea that you are culturally poor. You don't have any heritage. Your people didn't build anything. Your people didn't make anything. So, and that was when I realized, because again, I was heavily influenced by Chancellor Williams's The Destruction of Black Civilization.
Yes.
And then you find out that while the outline of his story is basically correct, all the evidence wasn't destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm finding out that, fine ivory salt cellars that were made in West Africa. Now, a lot of people listening to this will be thinking, salt cellars aren't particularly impressive. You haven't seen the ones that Africans used to make.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? You then find out there's 800 of them in different European museums' collections.
Right.
Well, how comes all 800 aren't being spoken about anywhere? Do you see?
Mm-hmm.
And then you realize people are sitting on the information. Yeah. Manuscripts, people are sitting on manuscripts.
And when you found out this type of this information, how did that make you feel?
On one hand, surprised that I was fooled. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, evangelical in getting the information out. And let me give you a recent example of that. Mm-hmm. Last year, Jaguar Land Rover invited me to do a presentation on them called Finders Keepers, African Arts in European Museums. Okay. Yeah, that meant I had to research which pieces are in the museums. Mm-hmm. I do know how to search a database or whatever. So I was able to go through the British Museum's website and search for what do they have. And if you keep your options very open, they'll show you all the things that they have. And I'm seeing this carpet not on display. This rug not on display. This curtain not on display. Mm-hmm. Right. Before my say so, African civilizations having curtains. Did you know that?
Not until I looked at not until I learned, obviously, from your
right. We didn't have that information.
No.
Right? And these are the things that will keep on changing the perspective as we find more and more. And you then realize that if you can do that with the British Museum, you could probably do that with the Louvre Museum and find what they, in other words, they've got more stuff in the vaults than they do have actually on display.
I think the more you realize that there's this concealment, right? You learn different things. I think one of the most profound things that I don't know why it interests me was about toilets and how we had toilets way before. Mm-hmm. When was this again?
That's just it. You see, I make a whole point of talking about toilets.
Yes.
All right, this is what it is. I mean, the first toilets we know about are ancient Egyptian, mm-hmm. and probably go back to the Amarna era, the era of Pharaoh to Akhenaten. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But when it comes to the rest of Africa, we know that in the Songhai Empire, the cities of Timbuktu and Jenne, they had toilets on the upper floor. The Ashanti Empire in modern-day Ghana, their capital city of Kumasi, had, again, toilets on the second floor in their own room. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The Swahili civilization, they didn't just have toilets, they had a toilet right next to a bath. Mm-hmm. Pretty much the way we have it now in a modern civilization. Right. And they had bidets as well.
And bidets. Well, yeah. And okay, so when we talked about concealment, do you speak about why do you feel people have concealed our history?
I get it. Mm-hmm. It's a simple thing. This is how you generate racism against black people. Mm-hmm. Tell the whole world that we were jungle savages, and therefore the violence meted out against us is justified, because to kill a jungle savage is not a crime. To kill a civilized human is a crime. Mm-hmm. Now, it shouldn't be that way. It should be kill anybody, it's a crime. Right. But because the Western narrative, there was an idea that the first time I ever saw it in print was Sir Winston Churchill. Sir Winston Churchill's position is that the life of a savage is not equal to the life of a civilized human. Mm-hmm. And that's the argument that was used to destroy Australia, the native Australians. The same argument was used to destroy us. Exactly the same argument. Mm-hmm. And the way that you present people as savages is to make sure that their history isn't known.
Okay. This is why instead of the term white supremacy, I use the term white insecurity. I know other people have started to use the term as well, but I talk about white insecurity a lot in my work, and how I look at more of the how it's like what you just mentioned about people want to maintain a certain level of power, but then at the same time, why is that? And why is it that us as a group,
let me tell you what, I can answer that.
Yes, go ahead.
I worked it out. It's the Harlem Renaissance. Basically, you African Americans messed it up for the rest of us. That's why. Let me tell you what the deal was. 1865, you all were enslaved, all right? Mm-hmm. By the time we get to 1910, you all are on top of opera. You produced a musician called Harry Lawrence Freeman, who was writing operas that were up there with Wagner. You had, during the same time period, Scott Joplin, the king of ragtime. Right. He was based in Harlem. You had at the same time period people like Marian Anderson, the classical contralto singer, who Toscanini said a voice like this comes along once every 100 years, right? You had Caribbean writers like Claude McKay, blowing it up in Harlem. You had Duke Ellington, you had Fletcher Henderson, the kings of Harlem. You had Louis Armstrong was in Harlem. Mm-hmm. You had all the great tap dancers, all right? You had sculptors like Augusta Savage in Harlem. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she did a very famous sculpture called The Harp. The other name for it is Lift Every Voice and Sing. Mm. People want to Google that, they can take a look. Yeah?
Yes.
All right, so here's the thing. You now got people, if they're African American, 1.5 generations away from slavery, and they're at the top of the game. Right? You had Madame Walker, the first millionairess on the planet. All right? And if she wasn't the first, she was one of 4, because that, Guinness Book of Records are now debating. If it wasn't her, she's one of 4. And one of the others, her rival, Annie Malone, yeah, she was the other one. Okay. So 2 out of the 4 were African Americans, right? What else have you got? You've then got people like W.E.B. Du Bois doing his thing, and you had the Honorable Marcus Garvey doing his thing, all happening in Harlem, 1.5 generations away from slavery. Now, if you're a white supremacist and you're watching that, right, you can see that that's not going to go down very, very well. Right. And it's going to be a thinking that says, we have to keep our foot on these people's necks indefinitely to make sure that doesn't happen again. Okay. That's the importance of the Harlem Renaissance.
Okay, so if people want to know, do your own homework on the Harlem Renaissance. Okay, thank you for that. And I know we're stretched for time, so I'll try to get to another point. So within the traditional normative narratives that we talked about and reclaiming narratives, how is your research and activism, I'd say, flipping the script to those types of narratives, to the concealment and?
My most recent area of research, I have to thank African-American scholar Professor Vincent Taraku Farrar. Mm-hmm. And his book is called Pre-Colonial African Material Culture. Right. And what he's finding is that even during the worst period of our history, transatlantic enslavement, we were still making things happen. Mm-hmm. So the finest cotton in the 18th century world was coming from Senegambia. Now, once you know that, and once that's in a British government select committee report, you can work out what's going to happen next. Kidnap those people, bring them to the Americas, and make them cotton pickers. Get it? Mm-hmm. So we then get a transfer of technology. we already know that the smallpox vaccine was introduced into Boston by an enslaved African called Wanzimus.
Okay.
So the technique of inoculating people against smallpox was brought there by enslaved Africans, 1720, right?
Okay.
We know that there's now new research on turning scrap iron into good quality iron, known as the Henry Court process. It wasn't Henry Court. It was 76 enslaved Jamaicans who were doing that in a Jamaican foundry, and Henry Court was able to appropriate that technology. Do you see? And so essentially, when it comes to the relationship between Africa and the Americas, it's a transfer of technology, a transfer of agricultural technology, horsemanship, boat building technology, even architecture. You're from America, yeah? You know about the shotgun house, the type of house that they have in New Orleans.
Yes, sir.
You know that's of Yoruba origin. And I've traced the Yoruba buildings where they got that from.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so what we're finding then is the enslaved African did not come empty-handed. And then this is an area of research that particularly interests me because my background in music. The dances that make up English ballroom dances, I think 2/3 of them can be traced back to Africa.
2/3?
2/3. Right, so the ballroom dances, this is what we've got, yeah? The main one is the foxtrot. The foxtrot comes from 4 African-American plantation dances, yeah? The 4 are the camel walk, the turkey trot, the bunny hug, and the grizzly bear. And when you combine them, they become the foxtrot. Yeah? All right, then you've got the rumba. The rumba is Afro-Cuban. Yeah? Then you've got the tango. The tango is Afro-Argentinian. Yeah?
Okay.
Then we've got the mambo. The mambo is Black Cuban. Then you've got the cha-cha-cha, also Black Cuban. The only ones that are genuinely European is the waltz, the polka, and the paso doble. All the others come from us.
And do you feel like those 3, like the waltz, was influenced by us as well, or
can't prove it?
Okay, so
let's be clear. Yet, can't prove
I like
it
that.
yet.
Okay,
and the paso doble, can't prove that one.
Okay,
yet.
That's powerful. Okay, thank you for that. I know you have a train to catch.
Amen.
So I'm gonna go ahead and skip one of the questions, and I'm gonna get back. I'm gonna get to the final one. Does that sound okay? Yes. Okay, I see that. Okay, final one is okay. So we are now going to conclude this part of the show. You're going to offer us insight around rehumanization. Okay, so with everything that we talked about when it comes to like concealment, appropriation, how history is important, history is in everything, right? And we all need to know our history, right, to erase this mystery. And Professor Small is saying, what does rehumanization look like to you?
Rehumanization is really showing that the human race really is equal. And as the Honourable Minister Farrakhan says, you can't be equal and have nothing. If I'm the landlord and you're the tenant, we're not equal. I have to be a landlord too. And when it comes to the teaching of history, we cannot claim, no, people can't tell us you're equal, but none of your history and heritage is informing the writing of history, the writing of literature, the writing of music, the writing of fine art, the writing of physics. It has to inform all of it. And until we get to that level, we're not genuinely equal. And real rehumanization is to get it to that level.
So rehumanization is to get to a level of equalness, but I guess what that would mean, I guess, equity, right?
But equity in the knowledge production and how the knowledge is produced.
Right, exactly.
So in other words, if you're going to study construction at university, the largest construction project in history, the walls of Benin, has to be the first thing you study. And if it's not, there's no equity.
Mm-hmm. You're right.
Do you see? Mm-hmm. If we're going to study mathematics, the Egyptian origins of so-called Pythagorean theorem has to be there. And if it's not, we don't have equity.
We can even go as far back as you mentioned about Black African women being the first to count or
right,
mathematics, right? So,
and if that's not in there, there's no equity.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's powerful. So thank you for today. I really appreciate it. I know we have to go. Is there anything that anybody can follow you on just to end it, to conclude?
Okay, this is what I would say. There is a series of podcasts that I do with Dr. Julius Garvey. We call it Pan-Africanism Today. Check me out. We on YouTube. So type in Pan-Africanism Today on YouTube. And we've done a lot of podcasts and we're just building them up. Check me out on that. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. The Black History Man is with us today. We appreciate you I appreciate you coming really. I really do. And I hope you have a safe trip back and we'll get out of here. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.